second part of our lesson today is standard form of a line. And we're going to talk about three main forms of a linear equation, and this is one of them. And it's the most picky out of the three, as you'll see here in Chapter 5. And that's why it's nice to introduce this one first, because it has some rules that go along with it. But the form is a times x plus b times y equals c, where a, b, and c are real numbers, and a and b are both not zero. I'm going to be a little more picky here and say that these need to be integers. Alright? Meaning we don't want decimals and we don't want fractions. Alright? So a, b, and c are all numbers. They can be positive or negative, but we don't want any decimals, we don't want any fractions. The other thing that they leave out in this definition is that you want a, b, and c to be as simplified as possible. So here's an example of a possible standard form. Okay. Notice how 4, 2, and negative 10 can all be divided by 2. So if I divide this by 2, this by 2, and this by 2, I could rewrite this as 2x plus 1y, or just y, equals negative 5. This would be the best form of standard form that we could have, because a, b, and c cannot be simplified any further. Okay, they don't have a common factor. Whereas in the red equation, they had a common factor of 2 that I could divide them each by. So the circled answer is the best form of standard form that we can get. So the two pieces that they leave out in this definition is we don't want to have fractions or decimals for a, b, and c, and then we also want it to be as simplified as possible. And I'll show you what that looks like a little bit later here. The most important reason that they're introducing this to us is because if we have an equation that's in this form, for instance, the one that I had before, I don't remember it now, but let's just say 2x plus y equals negative 5. If we had this equation, I can look at it and say, okay, yes, this is in standard form, and that means I have a linear function. So that's why we have it. So anything that fits into standard form is going to be a linear function. Alright, so here are some things that I want to point out. So when we have a linear equation in standard form, notice that x and y both have exponents of 1, meaning there aren't any like squares or cubes or anything like that. These are all to the first power. X and y are not multiplied together, so there's no xy going on, and x and y do not appear in denominators, exponents, or radical signs. So by looking at an equation, we can figure out if it's going to be linear or not very easily. If it can be put into standard form, that's what they do in the blue, then it's going to be a linear equation. And we'll talk about faster ways to check that out in the future. But you can see even with like this example here, so this is a linear equation, because if I just take, if I subtract y on both sides of the equation, I get negative 2 equals 3x minus y. Now we are in standard form. That's a linear equation. Okay, it's very easy to point out and look at, do I have a nonlinear equation? Because if I have x times y going on, not linear. If I have a variable to a power other than 1, it's not going to be linear. If I have a variable in the denominator, not going to be linear. Okay, so that's how we can just look at an equation and decide that. Real quick, last example. Remember, if we can put it into standard form, then yes, it is a linear function. And in order to do that, remember, we don't want any fractions going on. So if you ever see fractions or something in the denominator, and it's okay if it's a number. If it's a variable, then it's not linear. But let's check. If I multiply everything here through by 3, I can get rid of this 3 right here, that division by 3. And we've used this technique before to clear the fraction. So I'm going to multiply this by 3, this by 3, and this by 3. And we get a different equation, 6x equals, our 3's cancel out, so we're just left with y minus 12. Alright, and if we can put this into standard form, or ax plus by change this is subtract y over. And now we have 6x minus y equals negative 12. And it is okay if we have the minus y here. This is in standard form. So yes, this is a linear function. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. And like I said, this is the most picky form that we have. But at this point, we're just looking at, can you identify standard form and understand what a linear equation looks like and a nonlinear equation? All right, that's all I've got for you tonight.